Picture this. The afternoon sun hangs low over a rocky valley thousands of years ago. A small hunting party is making its way through dry grass, scanning the ground for tracks. Then, everything changes in a single heartbeat. One hunter freezes. A sharp sting shoots through his ankle. He looks down just in time to catch a glimpse of a snake disappearing beneath the rocks. Within moments, panic spreads through the group. There are no hospitals, no ambulances, no antivenom waiting nearby. Just miles of wilderness and the slow, terrifying question of what happens next. At first, survival seems almost impossible. Even today, venomous snake bites kill thousands of people every year, despite modern medicine. So, how could someone living tens of thousands of years ago have stood any chance? You might assume the answer is simple. Maybe they just accepted their fate. Maybe snake bites were always fatal. But the deeper researchers looked into ancient human survival, the less convincing that explanation became. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence that early humans kept returning to landscapes filled with venomous snakes instead of avoiding them. Ancient camps appeared near rocky shelters, rivers, and forests where dangerous species thrived. If snake bites almost always meant death, why would generation after generation continue living in places where one careless step could end everything? That mystery only grows stranger when you realize humans didn't merely survive these environments. They spread across them, raised families there, and eventually conquered nearly every continent on Earth. Somewhere in that long journey, our ancestors discovered something that transformed a deadly encounter into a fight they could sometimes win. But what exactly did they know that we've almost forgotten? The first clue seems surprisingly straightforward. Ancient humans probably survived snake bites the same way they survived countless other dangers. By learning from experience, every encounter became a lesson. A child watched where older hunters stepped. Gatherers learned which piles of leaves to avoid. Camps were built where snakes were easier to spot, and people carrying firewood or reaching into dark crevices became far more cautious than those who ignored the risks. Over thousands of years, these habits weren't written in books. They were passed from one generation to the next through stories, warnings, and observation. Picture an evening around a campfire. An elder points toward a rocky hillside and explains that certain places belong to snakes when the sun is warm. No one argues. They've seen what happens to those who forget. Eventually, recognizing snake behavior becomes almost as important as tracking deer or finding clean water. Modern studies of traditional hunter-gatherer communities reveal something similar. People living close to nature often identify dangerous snakes from remarkable distances, noticing tiny movements or patterns that an untrained eye completely misses. What looks like luck is usually experience sharpened over a lifetime. At first glance, that seems to answer everything. Fewer surprises meant fewer bites, and fewer bites meant more survivors. It's a convincing explanation, and there's truth in it. But then another question appears. Even the most careful person can make one fatal mistake: a hidden snake beneath a sleeping mat, a hand placed on the wrong rock, or a bite during a nighttime storm. Doesn't care how experienced you are. Avoiding snakes explains how people reduce the danger. It doesn't explain how they survived after venom was already flowing through their bodies. And that's where the mystery becomes far more intriguing. The common belief is that a venomous snake bite was almost always a death sentence in the ancient world. It sounds reasonable. Without antivenom, modern hospitals, or advanced medical knowledge, how could anyone possibly recover? For years, that assumption shaped the way many people imagined prehistoric life. But the evidence tells a more complicated story. Human skeletons discovered at ancient archaeological sites often show signs of remarkable resilience. Individuals survived broken bones, crushed limbs, severe infections, and injuries that should have ended their lives long before modern medicine existed. These weren't isolated cases. Again and again, researchers found people who lived for years after devastating wounds, suggesting something extraordinary about early human communities. Survival wasn't always about curing an injury. Sometimes it was about buying enough time for the body to do the rest. That changes the way we should think about snake bites. Not every venom works the same way. Some attack the nervous system. Others destroy blood vessels or muscle tissue. And perhaps most importantly, not every bite delivers the same amount of venom. Modern herpetologists even have a name for it, a dry bite, where a venomous snake strikes but injects little or no venom at all. Other bites release only a small dose, giving the victim a fighting chance. Suddenly, survival no longer seems impossible. Ancient people didn't need to defeat every snake. They only needed enough successful recoveries for knowledge to spread across generations. But here's the contradiction. Even a small amount of venom can become deadly without proper care. Infection, dehydration, shock, or panic could easily turn a survivable bite into a fatal one. If experience alone wasn't enough, and luck couldn't explain thousands of years of survival, then what invisible advantage did ancient humans possess? The next clue doesn't come from snakes at all. It comes from the human body itself. That question eventually led researchers in an unexpected direction. Instead of asking how ancient humans treated snake bites, they began asking something even more fundamental. What if the first line of defense wasn't a remedy at all? What if it was the human body itself? To investigate, scientists compared how different mammals respond to venom. The expectation seemed obvious. Humans, lacking fangs or venom of their own, should be especially vulnerable. But the results didn't fit that assumption. Experiments and medical observations revealed that humans possess surprisingly complex immune responses to many toxins. While no one is naturally immune to snake venom, the body immediately begins fighting back. Blood starts carrying defensive proteins. Cells rush toward damaged tissue. The immune system launches a desperate race against the venom spreading through the bloodstream. Whether someone lives or dies often depends on countless factors: the snake species, the amount of venom injected, where the bite landed, and how quickly the body responds. Then archaeologists added another piece to the puzzle. Ancient burial sites occasionally reveal individuals who lived long after suffering serious injuries that would have required weeks or even months of recovery. Someone had protected them, fed them, and kept them alive while their bodies healed. That discovery transformed the mystery. Survival in prehistoric times wasn't always an individual achievement. It was often a group effort. The implication was enormous. Perhaps a snake bite didn't become survivable because ancient humans found a magical cure. Perhaps they survived because they refused to abandon the victim. A wounded hunter who couldn't walk might be carried back to camp instead of being left behind. Water, shelter, and constant care could mean the difference between life and death. But that answer created another mystery. If cooperation was the real advantage, why did humans become far better at surviving venom than many other intelligent animals living in the very same landscapes? One story from southern Africa offers a glimpse into what that advantage may have looked like. For generations, the Sand People lived in landscapes where venomous snakes were part of everyday life. To an outsider, it seemed impossible. Every hunting trip, every search for roots, every walk through tall grass carried the risk of a deadly encounter. Yet these communities endured for thousands of years. Imagine a young hunter setting out before sunrise with older members of the group. He's taught how to read the ground long before he's trusted to hunt alone. A winding trail in the sand, a freshly disturbed patch of dust, the faint outline of scales beside a rock warmed by the morning sun. These tiny clues mean the difference between returning home or never returning at all. But even experience couldn't prevent every accident. Historical observations describe what happened next. If someone was bitten, the hunt ended immediately. The injured person wasn't abandoned to save the others. Instead, the group's attention shifted completely. They slowed down, supported the victim, carried them when necessary, and stayed together. Survival became everyone's problem. That choice came with a cost. Carrying an injured hunter meant losing valuable time, food, and energy. Predators still roamed nearby, and daylight was limited. Logically, leaving one person behind might have seemed like the safer decision. They rarely did. Anthropologists believe this willingness to protect vulnerable members helped shape human survival itself. Communities that cared for the injured preserved not only lives but also knowledge. The elder who survived a snake bite could later teach children which snakes to avoid, which seasons were most dangerous, and how to recognize the warning signs hidden in the landscape. In other words, every survivor became a living library. And that raises an even bigger question. Was humanity's greatest defense against snakes never medicine at all, but culture? By now, the story has grown far beyond a single snake bite. What first looked like a question about venom is beginning to look like a question about survival itself. And the more researchers compare different cultures, environments, and even other species, the more a remarkable pattern began to emerge. Across Africa, Australia, Asia, and the Americas, ancient communities developed strikingly similar behaviors despite being separated by thousands of miles and countless generations. Dangerous snakes lived in each of these regions, yet people didn't simply retreat from them. They learned the seasons when snakes were most active. They altered hunting routes, cleared sleeping areas, carried fire at night, and taught children to recognize danger almost as soon as they could walk. Different continents, different languages, the same solution. Even nature seemed to follow a familiar script. Certain animals like meerkats and mongooses survive alongside venomous snakes, not because they're immune, but because they rely on teamwork, quick communication, and generations of learned behavior. One individual spots the danger, but the entire group reacts. The lesson spreads long before another snake appears. Humans took that strategy even further. Unlike other animals, we didn't just remember dangerous encounters, we turned them into stories, rituals, and traditions. A single survivor could teach dozens of children. Those children would grow into adults who warned the next generation. Over centuries, one close call became shared knowledge, and shared knowledge became culture. Think about that for a moment. The greatest weapon our ancestors carried may not have been a spear or a stone axe. It may have been the ability to pass experience from one mind to another without everyone having to suffer the same mistake. And yet, there's one final piece that still doesn't fit. If knowledge and cooperation were so powerful, why do some of the oldest cultures in the world preserve elaborate legends, rituals, and even sacred respect for snakes, instead of treating them as nothing more than dangerous animals? Of course, history isn't filled with perfect success stories. There were moments when everything people had learned simply wasn't enough. A hunter could recognize every warning sign and still step on a snake hidden beneath loose leaves. A child could be bitten while gathering berries. Even the strongest warrior could collapse within minutes if the venom was especially potent. History preserves rare examples that remind us just how unpredictable these encounters could be. One of the most famous is Cleopatra VII Philopator, who has long been associated with the bite of an Egyptian cobra, although historians still debate exactly how she died. Whether the story is entirely true or not, it reflects something important. Ancient people understood that certain snakes possessed terrifying power, and they treated them with a mixture of fear and respect. There were exceptions on the other side as well. Some individuals survived bites that should have been fatal, while others died from species considered less dangerous. Modern medicine explains why. Venom isn't delivered with perfect consistency. Age, body size, bite location, health, and even the snake's recent hunting activity can influence how much venom enters the wound. Two people bitten by the same species can experience completely different outcomes. That's why no ancient remedy could guarantee survival. Sometimes skill mattered, sometimes community mattered, and sometimes fate played an unavoidable role. These exceptions don't weaken the story, they strengthen it. They reveal that ancient humans weren't invincible, nor did they possess a forgotten miracle cure. Instead, they survived because they combined knowledge, cooperation, and remarkable adaptability whenever luck gave them even the smallest chance. And that final clue leads directly to the biggest revelation of all. So how did ancient humans survive snake bites? The surprising answer is that they usually didn't defeat the venom. They defeated the odds. For centuries, people searched for a hidden medicine, a forgotten plant, or a mysterious antidote that explained humanity's survival. It's an appealing idea. Every great mystery seems like it should have one dramatic solution. But when archaeologists, anthropologists, and medical researchers placed all the evidence together, a very different picture emerged. There was no single secret. Instead, survival was built from dozens of small advantages working together. A sharp-eyed hunter spotted a snake before anyone else did. An experienced elder recognized the safest path through the grass. A frightened child remembered a warning told around a campfire years earlier. A family carried an injured relative instead of leaving them behind. A body fought the venom while companions provided water, shelter, and time. Each advantage seemed insignificant on its own. Together, they became one of humanity's greatest survival strategies. This is what makes humans different from almost every other species. Most animals evolve through genetics alone. Humans evolve through knowledge. One person's close call becomes everyone else's lesson. Information survives even when individuals don't. Every snake bite, every mistake, every unexpected recovery added another piece to an invisible survival manual that existed only in memory and conversation. Think about what that really means. The true opposite of venom wasn't medicine. It was culture. Long before books, schools, or written language, humans had already built a living network of shared experience. Every generation inherited thousands of tiny observations without ever realizing it. Where to sleep, where not to reach, which sounds meant danger, how to react instead of panic. Those lessons quietly spread across continents, allowing people to live in landscapes that should have been impossible to inhabit. In the end, snakes didn't shape humanity simply by threatening our lives. They helped shape the very thing that made us human. Because every time our ancestors chose to teach instead of forget, to cooperate instead of abandon, and to learn instead of repeat a fatal mistake, they passed along something far more powerful than an antidote. They passed along the knowledge to keep the next generation alive. Go back to that rocky valley where a hunter stood frozen after feeling a sudden sting in his ankle. As the snake disappeared into the shadows, it probably seemed like the story would end there. But now we can picture the rest of the scene differently. His companions didn't simply watch. They lifted him, slowed their journey, shared their water, and hoped the lessons passed down over countless generations would be enough to keep him alive until sunrise. That moment was never just about one person. It was about a species slowly discovering that survival isn't won by strength alone. It's won by memory, by trust, by the willingness to carry someone when they can no longer walk on their own. Perhaps that's the most remarkable part of this mystery. Venom forced humans to become better observers, better teachers, and better partners. Every dangerous encounter left behind more than fear. It left behind knowledge. And unlike venom, knowledge didn't disappear when the wound healed. It spread from one campfire to another, from one generation to the next, quietly shaping the future. So maybe the greatest weapon our ancestors ever developed wasn't a sharper spear or a stronger shield. It was the simple decision that no lesson should die with the person who learned it. And in many ways, civilization itself began with that choice.